This episode is brought to you by The Science of Scaling. And The Science of Scaling is a podcast that, honestly, you should check out.
Yeah, it's called The Science of Scaling, and it's all about how to scale a business successfully, whether it's how to find outside capital or what to look for in your very first sales hire.
It's a new show hosted by Mark Roberge. She's the best-selling author of The Sales Acceleration Formula. He's also a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School and the founding CRO of HubSpot.
One thing that Mark mentions in the show is whether your company is valued at $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, the failure rate is the same, which means we suck at scaling.
In each episode, you'll hear interviews with people like Kyle Parrish, the VP of Sales at Figma, and Kevin Egan, the head of sales at Atlassian.
I've checked out a few episodes of The Science of Scaling, and it's great. Like, for me, I run a company as a bootstrap company. We're not the kind of company that's raised capital, but even still, things like sales, that's super important, and it's the lifeblood of our company. So for me, it's definitely helpful to hear how other people have sort of, who have been there and done it before, how they're actually approaching scaling. So go on in your favorite podcast app, whatever it might be, and search for The Science of Scaling. That's The Science of Scaling. Check it out. I think you're really going to enjoy it.
So as many of you may know, I ventured out this year. I left my job as the chief product officer at Dribbble to start a brand new company. And that company is gigantic. No, really, that's the name. We're actually very small today. But we are the training institute of the future. And my goal is to help you master the new influential disciplines that are driving results within organizations. And we're starting with some absolutely incredible courses like product leadership taught by Ben Foster, the former CPO at Whoop, deconstructing leadership with Allison Go, formerly of Meta and Amazon. We have revolutionizing marketing with AI, which is taught by Marie Osipova, who is the chief marketing officer at Penny.ai, and an upcoming product management course, which is taught by my co-host, Mike Belcito, along with Anna Marie Clifton of Coinbase and Asana, and Victoria Kennedy, who worked at Axios and Huge, and is now running her own venture capital studio. It's not just video courses. We're combining video lectures with take-home assignments and exercises, and then small group mentorship to really help make this information indelible for you and to help level you up, and all at a cost that most companies' learning and development budget covers. So if you're interested, go to gigantic.is, that's gigantic.is, sign up for a course, and you can actually schedule a call with me, and I'll walk you through everything that you need to know. And if you enroll and let me know that you heard about this on Rocketship, I've got a special discount for you. So go to gigantic.is, sign up today, and start your journey upskilling your product, leadership, and marketing skills. I can't wait to see you there.
This episode of Rocketship.fm is sponsored by Industry, the Product Conference. This October, gather with hundreds of product managers and product leaders from all around the world for 2 days of keynote talks, challenging working sessions, interactive discussions, social events, and more. Or add a third day and take part in half-day workshops with some of today's top product management facilitators for workshops on leading your teams to innovation, product roadmaps, achieving product market fit, and more. This year's lineup may be the best yet, with keynote speakers including product legend Marty Kagan. He's the author of the book Inspired, which is considered by many to be the seminal book for product managers and product leaders. There's also product positioning expert and author of Obviously Awesome April Dunford, and product leaders from Figma, IDEO, Amplitude, and so many other places. Plus, if you use the code Rocketship, you'll save $100 off your pass. Visit industryconference.com/global for more details. Again, industryconference/global for more information, but pricing increases on the first of the month, so register soon to save.
Welcome to the Rocketship podcast. I'm Michael Sacca.
I'm Joelle Steiniger.
And I'm Matt Goldman.
And we're having 20-minute talks with entrepreneurs teaching you how to launch your product into revenue.
Check out our book at howtobuildarocketship.com to reserve your launch discount and to download a free chapter.
This week we talked with Todd Garland, the founder of BuySellAds, about how you don't need to be the first to market. We also chatted a bit about how old-fashioned hustle and personal touch still literally pays off. I think you guys are seriously going to like this one.
Welcome to the Rocketship podcast. We're here with Todd Garland, the founder of BuySellAds, which is my favorite ad network on the planet. So, Todd, we've been kind of discussing the early days of BuySellAds and how you got it off the ground. Why don't you take us back to what made you start getting into the ad business?
Sure thing. So So for some context, BuySellAds primarily started in like the web design and development space, and helping those types of publishers sell ads to advertisers. And what it really came down to is I myself was passionate about web design and development. I had a couple hobby blogs that I was using to make some money on the side. And ultimately, I discovered that I was much better at helping folks like myself monetize their sites than I was actually in writing about web design and development and writing tutorials and stuff. And so that's largely why I launched BuySellAds, is because I found a better way to get advertiser money and Robin Hood it over to the publishers.
So what did the ad space look like in 2009? Who was your main competitor?
Yeah, so the only other company dabbling in I guess what I consider the sponsorship side of online advertising was AdBright. And I think just because of their evolution and where they were, they'd been around for, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, or 5 years at that point in 2008. They were at the point where they'd already built copious numbers of features into their product. But ultimately what people wanted was just something much simpler than that. And so that was kind of the core difference between BuySellAds and AdBright, is that we literally only sold ads at fixed 30-day rates. That was the only way you could sell.
I think there's something really interesting there too, because a lot of people in this space, when you're trying to get into the SaaS world, you're thinking of a new market you can break into, or trying to come up with some completely novel idea. And what I found really interesting about BuySellAds is that you kind of proved something which I think is true, and that you don't need a completely new market. You just need to solve a problem better for an existing market, and to know that. I mean, I don't know what your thought process was like at the time when you decided to go up against AdBright, but it sounds like you had a completely different idea of how things should be done. I don't know if you kind of just made the decision lightly to give it a shot, or if you knew you were taking on, a David and Goliath situation. But I think there's something really interesting there.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest, I was pretty naive going into it. And had I known that it was David and Goliath, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I think that's the beauty of being naive about something and being able to take a fresh perspective on an industry that has a ton of history and a lot of baggage. Is just being able to go into it with a fresh set of eyes and trying to figure out how you can break down a problem at the most basic level to help people do something a little bit differently and help them, solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so what did that the first launch look like? You're going up against AdBright, and what was that page that you launched with?
Yeah, so I guess the story I always like to tell is that I launched with folks call it minimum viable product. This was like minimum viable, archaic version of the worst coded HTML page ever.
Sounds good.
So quite literally, people would submit their website for approval, and I'd get that email saying it had been submitted. I'd go to their website, I'd take a screenshot manually, I'd bring that into Photoshop, I'd resize it, and upload that screenshot to the server, and then update the database with the file name so that it would look like their profile was created for them. And in the meantime, there was like a default screenshot that said, processing. So they just didn't know that it was me in Photoshop actually processing the screenshot. But that's just an example of like, you know, those things that like aren't directly related to solving the actual problem. Like people weren't using BuySellAds because they wanted to have an automatic screenshot generated of their website. They're using BuySellAds because they wanted an easier way to sell ads to advertisers.
Right.
And so things like that aren't critical to the process can easily be, you know, offloaded into manual things. You know.
So what else in that first version was either left out or mocked like that?
Cash outs, and what a cash out is once the publisher actually makes money through BuySellAds, they can then withdraw that money. So you had to actually send me an email. There was a link in the publisher dashboard that said, you know, cash out your money, and it would just pop up an email to support at BuySellAds.com. Advertisers also couldn't actually cancel their ads without sending me an email. Which probably sounds crazy, but you know, as it turns out, doing things that way forced them and me to get to know each other, and so it allowed me to, instead of, you know, trying to figure out how to build personality into the software, I was able to just, you know, be personality over email, which then further kind of roped people into enjoying doing business with BuySellAds. Hopefully, right? I mean, that was the goal. The goal was to The goal wasn't to have to do these things manually. The goal was to get the site live. And a nice byproduct of skipping some of those things that should have been automated was that it allowed me to build a rapport with all of our customers.
I think that's awesome. One of the things that when you're building a product, you see all these other products around you that have amazing experiences, and you compare yourself to that. So features like the automatic screenshot generator or cash outs, you picture people just hating you if you leave something out like that. But when we do leave something out and force ourselves to push out a version of Hookfeed, we realize that people don't get angry. And it's like you said, a lot of times it's just a chance to talk to them, and they don't blame you. They understand that it's a small team, and it's almost an opportunity to show them how fast you can respond and help them out.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, what people care about is that you're solving some sort of problem for them. Anything else is just bonus, you know? So.
This episode is supported by the AWS Insiders podcast. AWS Insiders is a fast-paced, entertaining, and insightful look behind the scenes of AWS and cloud computing. Hosts Raul Submaranian and Hillary Doyle dig into the current state and the future of AWS by talking with people and companies that know it best. It's a show that's full of opinions, takeaways, and untold stories about the challenges, innovations, and mind-blowing promise of cloud computing. I checked out AWS Insiders, and look, it is a fantastic show, and it's perfect for anyone in tech who's looking for some of those behind-the-scenes stories, for some reassurance that, yeah, things are a little nuts everywhere, and everyone is struggling with a lot of the same problems. The first episode of season 2 is all about filling the cloud talent gap, and it's an interesting discussion on what do we do to help to staff up internally. What are some of the challenges that companies are facing? Search for AWS Insiders in your podcast player. We'll also include a link in the show notes. Thank you to AWS Insiders for their support. This episode is brought to you by Miro. So when I was at Dribbble, over the 6 years, there was one tool that we would always use when we were doing cross-team collaboration. Whenever the collaboration started to get complex, we would bring in Miro. It made it incredibly easy to align stakeholders across regions and time zones, and definitely teams, with ease. And we were able to do all of that while being a completely remote team. It also has integrations into Jira, Azure, Rally, a lot of the tools that you're using already for product management and engineering. So you can import tasks from them as native cards, and it helps you see the big picture. It also helps stakeholders to understand what work needs to be done. It was incredibly valuable. And then they even have an estimation app that gives you a clear understanding of the work scope, lets you identify gaps, and then it has the ability for you to set clear expectations for delivery, especially when you're working across functions. So Your first 3 Miro boards are free forever when you sign up today. Go to Miro.com/podcast. That's Miro.com/podcast.
So you launched this kind of strip back product. How were you driving people to it? I mean, how were you really getting your first customers?
The term has definitely become cliche, but really I was just hustling. I was looking for people online that who I felt had a problem that I could actually solve. And so ultimately what it meant is that I just really understood the product that we were trying to build, and I really understood the problem that we were solving. And so I was able to articulate that pretty effectively to folks who I had identified as having that same problem. I wasn't automating any of that kind of early hustle or anything like that. We still don't to this day. There's something nice about a well-targeted cold email. Cold calls and cold emails, they, everybody hates to get them, but when you receive that one that's like, wow, I think you can actually help me, you reply, So I think as long as you stay human in the way that you approach people and you don't nag them, I have people who will try to pitch me on services, and I'll get like 3-4 emails before I finally get angry and send them back an email and say, hey, can you just remove me from your list? I'm not interested. So I think it just takes a certain amount of tact and, a certain human quality, I guess, to knowing how to communicate effectively via email.
Yeah, actually, I loved your example cold email that you have in your speaker deck from Valio, because we have I forget who coined the term. It might have been an Amy Hoy term, the IREA, where you send someone an email and it's everything about me and verbal IREA, basically. And your email is really right off the bat all about them, what you're going to solve for them. You notice that they have a problem and you want to make it easier, and it's short. It's really kind of the perfect cold email. So we'll pull that out in the notes so that anyone listening can take a look and see, because it's really a great example.
Cool. Thanks. I think it's also important to note that the invite code in that email is just like a random, me hitting the keyboard, 10 times.
To make it look like it was a private beta?
Yeah. So the only thing that actually prevented you from registering at BuySellAds was the absence of some sort of invite code. So you could type, $invite equals whatever onto the URL and then register.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just another example of don't build features that you really don't need.
Yeah. Because simple little things like that can balloon. I mean, there's a lot of code these days that you can use to simplify and make things easier to build in, but that can easily take up a half day or a day that could either be spent on something else or could push up your launch sooner.
Totally.
Kind of speaking of time, you weren't working full time on BuySellAds in the very beginning. I'd love to hear a bit about what you were doing in addition to BuySellAds to pay the bills during that time.
Sure. So I was working a full-time job at a company called HubSpot here in Boston. And even before that, I was freelancing while I'd started building BuySellAds. So, whether it was freelance work or an actual full-time job, it was still kind of the same general concept of having some sort of consulting work that pays the bills on the side while you're trying to build a product that, sustains itself.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things that we kind of talked about before jumping on was the stigma around freelancing, which I think led you into HubSpot. Could you
there's kind of this expectation that if you are launching a SaaS product, it's almost a failure if you're still taking this consulting work, and that's just not the case. I mean, it's a slow road to get things going. So, we'd love to hear kind of the timeline of how long you worked at HubSpot doing the juggle, when you were finally able to make the leap over full time.
Yeah, sure. So at the end, I was working at HubSpot for 2 years. About, I think, half that time was as a contractor. So while I was doing my other freelance work as well, and while I was working on the initial version of BuySellAds. I didn't actually launch BuySellAds when I had it finished. It kind of sat on the shelf. I think it was either like 3 or 6 months that it just sat there before I actually launched. And like I said, I was working at HubSpot, and the reason why I took the job at HubSpot is because I felt as though I needed to prove myself that I could actually hold a real job. I think there's this this back then anyway. There's this weird stigma toward people who freelance that it wasn't a real job, or when you had to tell your relatives that you were a webmaster because that's the only term that they could understand. So for me, part of accepting the job at HubSpot was circumstantial. I was getting married that year, and I felt as though I needed to prove to my fiance and and family that I could have a real job and I was worthy of being married to. As odd as it may sound, that's one thing that definitely weighed on me in leading up to taking that job at HubSpot. Anyway, fast forward. So I launched BuySellAds February 2008, and then I left HubSpot at the end of 2008. So January 1st, 2009, I was 100% on my own. So there's about an 11-month ramp-up period before I could actually go out on it full time.
Nice. And then when did you hire your first employee?
So first full-time employee was June of 2009.
Okay.
And I think part of the one of the more interesting parts about the BuySellAds story is that it was June and not something like April because our first hire had to first graduate high school.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
And he now holds a pretty important position.
He's the co-founder of BuySellAds now. So
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Did you know him beforehand?
Well, I mean, we had started just before the end of 2008. We had started working on the new version, so he was working as a contractor, and he just didn't come on full time until June once he had finished high school.
Yeah, so you had the trial period. He was going to work out.
Yeah, exactly. We rewrote the entire BuySellAds code because I'm a not even a designer, like a diviner, a front end kind of coder type person. And most certainly not a developer. And we rewrote the entire code base between January 1st and April 15th.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a pretty crazy stretch.
That's awesome. So I'd love to talk a bit about what you guys are rolling out today, because you guys have gone through the startup period. You have, I think, 19 employees now, but you're rolling out a new product, which is the Publisher Pro. And this is something that we actually use. But we wanted to talk a bit about the landing page and how you guys decided to put the design together. There aren't a lot of screenshots of the application. You've really, you walk the user through what the benefits are, and we'd love to hear how you guys came about that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's actually, you're right, there's 0 screenshots of the actual app. We're just trying to help paint a picture of what we expect or what we assume a user wants to aspire towards. And a lot of it stems around just the ever-changing landscape, if you will, of display advertising and advertising on the web in general, because a lot's changing. The same display ads we were selling back in 2008, they just aren't as effective for advertisers here in 2014. So things are changing. Publishers are being forced to kind of change how they monetize, and there's a lot going on. And so in terms of the landing page, basically all we're trying to do is help a publisher see that there is something else out there that can help you monetize, and then get them to get in touch with us. There's no pricing. There's just a lead form. We don't collect a credit card or anything like that just yet.
Are you targeting kind of a new, I want to say niche, I don't know if that's the right word, market of people who now want to interact with ads via an API? Or are you are your current customers transitioning over to this new way of serving ads?
So, ad software and ad tech is largely like clunky, and even ad software built 5 years ago is kind of stale in a way. And so what we're trying to do is just bring a breath of fresh air into ad serving at its core, which is, to your question, folks looking to serve ads through an API and stuff like that. And then on top of that, just help them or give them better tools that allow them to be more efficient. Because the reality is that like publishers these days, they don't have like, sales teams of 4 or 5 people who can actually go out and sell ads. It's much more centered around like the indie developer who just has to do more with less. And so that's what the tool speaks to.
Yeah, and it is really easy to integrate. So what's been kind of the most interesting use case you've seen around this API?
That's actually that's a good question. So I think the most interesting use case is actually a product we built on top of it.
Okay.
And we built like a pay-per-click native ad thing, I guess I'll call it, on top of it. That's at promoted.com.
Okay.
But I mean, I think in general, like, and I don't, I don't necessarily want to talk about like why my new product is so great and all that kind of stuff. I think in general, it's an example of how, businesses like continuously have to reinvent themselves. Yep. I mean, if you look back 2008, 6 years ago when we first launched BuySellAds, like now Publisher Pro is effectively, it's our startup within a startup, Mm-hmm. It's us trying to reinvent ourselves as well. So I think that's the interesting part about Publisher Pro is that like we're at this interesting time in BuySellAds history, 6 years in, where now we're trying to recreate some new secret sauce, so to speak.
So are you familiar with Adi's new product?
Yes.
So he's talked a lot about how he built up Woo themes and had all this experience, and then he launched public beta, and it looked like it did pretty well before he pressed pause. But he said that there were a whole like new set of challenges that he had to face, and it wasn't as easy as he thought it would be. In launching this startup within a startup, have you guys found anything that you thought would be easy, or has it been a lot easier than the first run, having this audience of customers that you could reach out to that are more receptive to you?
Yeah, I think no matter what, it's always going to be hard for any company or even new company to launch a new thing. And I think that's an important thing for folks starting out for the first time and maybe launching their first company to understand is that while you may think you're up against Goliath, because they already have a customer base, and they already have tech, and they have a team, they have money and all those things, like, it really is much more of a level playing field than you might think. I think in general, it's hard to launch new things that are actually innovative and that people actually want to use. And, even for us to launch this new product, Publisher Pro, there's nothing stopping, Joe Schmo or Sally Schmo, whoever may be who's building the next, ad server. There's nothing to stop them from actually competing with us on a level playing field.
So we were actually just talking about that right before the call, how people avoid markets where they already see someone doing it. Maybe they're doing it really well. Maybe it just appears like they are, but you avoid it nonetheless because you think they've kind of cornered it off. But there's always room, and there's always a bunch of different ways to solve the same problem. So
totally,
I think you're definitely speaking to that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even look at folks like Stripe, right? I mean, like Stripe has theoretically come along and disrupted payments in some way because they made it so incredibly easy to get up and running, as opposed to the archaic folks like Authorize.net and WorldPay or whomever. But there's still like people coming up and competing with Stripe. There's Balance Payments, there's Braintree Payments, who is maybe even older than Stripe. I don't know. But anyway, my point is that like, even new folks are seeing constant, challenges to what they've built. So,
my favorite actual real world example of this right now is Lyft and Uber.
Yeah, totally.
On the taxis.
Yeah.
Yep. It's that's definitely a great example.
Well, thanks, Todd, for joining us and for anyone out there who has not seen BuySellAds, go to BuySellAds.com and check out the Publisher Pro. My face is even on the landing page. So
yeah, Todd, have you tested that? Have you gotten a different model?
We have something in there. So, Michael, when you log in, we track your IP address. So it's just you seeing.
Oh, dang it.
I'm just kidding. It's actually the only one there right now. We have some other examples we need to add, but
nice. So check out Publisher Pro. We use it on Benchwarmer and InstaTabs. It's fantastic. It solved our problem. So check that out. And Todd, thank you so much for joining us and kind of sharing your insight here into the SaaS world.
Yeah, thanks so much, Todd.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thanks everybody for listening.
Computers. On the chat room, on the AOL, on the Netscape, the Explorer. Yeah. They probably call him Steve Jobs because he got him. He could give a job to anybody, man, no problem. Computers downtown and computers up in Harlem. They running out of computers because everybody bought them. Caught him up in the web of the world and it's wide. With YouTubes, there's more science than Bill Nye, the science guy. I'm wild and why? Because the internet filled with spies from the NSA, that's crazy. The internet filled with government wise guys that's maybe trying to give you the disease, the rabies. Yeah, we self-curate social media. What happened to when you had to kick it with Tina to know if she was feeling ya? Free yourself from my control, he's just freeing ya. If you're feeling me, I'm feeding y'all the real knowledge of the mind, body, and the soul.
Hey, this is Mary Beth Lassiter. Are you craving a new podcast? I've got a recommendation. Check out Gravy, the James Beard award-winning podcast that shares stories of the changing American South, brought to you through the foods we eat. It's produced by the Southern Foodways Alliance and distributed by APT Podcast Studios. Listen to Gravy on your porch during happy hour to hear about the mystery of the missing Pappy Van Winkle bourbon. Don't miss out. Follow Gravy wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey guys, welcome to The Collective. I'm Brianne Helfrich, a 26-year-old bioethics PhD student and clothing brand CEO. Welcome to my podcast where we talk all things health and wellness, navigating your 20s, and becoming the best version of yourself. So, sit down, play that episode, and join the collective.